we can get started. Welcome to today's FIMS Let's Talk Solution Introduction to Financial Statement Design. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording and this will be sent out along with a handout that Robin has created. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. I'm Jessica Papard, the Senior Marketing Manager here at Impact, taking over for Amy while she's at a conference today. Today, you'll be hearing from Robin, and Leanne is on with us to answer any questions that you have in the Q&A. Our agenda today will cover design statements overview, creating row formats, creating column formats, creating statement records, and finally running financial statements. And with that, Robin, take it away.
All right, let me share my screen. Number 2. Okay, can you guys see my FIMS at this point?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thanks, Jess, and thanks everybody for joining today's session. This is going to be an introduction to financial statement design. There is more details that I will not actually have time to cover today, but I have put together some documentation and a handout that will be accessible to everybody after the session. Certainly if you have any questions, Leanne is with us also, and happy to answer anything that you might have. Okay, so design statements, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview here. So the general ledger, and I'm going to make this full screen so it's bigger. The general ledger module includes a statement design system that is specifically geared towards creating statements based on general ledger information. Now, these fund statements or financial statements or columnar statements can be based on all of your fund codes. So if we look at the accounts tab, the codes that I'm referring to are your division code, your class code, your type code, your subtype code, and fund ID. So any of those codes can be used in the creation of your financial statements, and you'll see more detail on how this works in just a little bit. The information that comes into these design statements is also based on the GL year record. So to make that easy, the GL year record is what you can actually see in the Accounts Super tab in General Ledger. So it's based on the information that's in here, beginning balances, summarized activity, ending balances. It's pulling all of that information from the GL year record, which is what we're looking at here under the Accounts tab. Now, you cannot create detailed transaction reports using the design statement tool. There are other reports available to you for that. So up under the reports menu, there's year-to-date general ledger, there's a journal history report, there's a fund activity report. These can be used to see information at a detail or transaction level in the system. Now I'm going to go to design statements. So the design statement super tab on the far right hand side is where you're actually going to go to create or view or make edits to any of the custom financial statements that have been created previously. And what we're looking at here is actually the statement browser. So this is a listing. So I'm going to click my binoculars. This is a listing of all of the custom statements that I have created in my system. And yes, I do have a lot just because I'm usually testing and running things in the system to make sure they're going to work. I'm going to give you a little bit of a peek into what these actually look like. So in order to run any of these custom financial statements that you've created, you're going to use the reports in between these two little gray lines from the reports menu. So the first thing that we have is consolidated financial statements. So consolidated financial statements could be statement of financial position. It could be a budget to actual report. It could be a P&L. So I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to run one so you can actually see an example of what I'm talking about. So this is going to be a budget to actual report, and I'm going to go to my selections tab and I'm going to filter this because I only want to see my operating fund. Now, under the format tab, I can choose my date, my year, my base period, and any information that I want to put in into any of these user defined fields. So let me run this. So this is a custom designed financial report in my system. It's a budget to actual. All of these fields down the left-hand side, the personnel header, the professional services, all of these are user defined along with the total rows and the actual GL accounts like salaries or accounting services. And then I've got columns for what my budget amounts are, what my actual amounts are. There's a dollar variance, and there's also a percentage variance that you can create. And I'm going to show you a few more of those farther along into the system. So now another one that we have here under reports is fund statements. So when I go to fund statements, I'm actually going to produce a fund statement in my FIMS viewer. So it's going to be on screen. And let me load this. So this is using a specific format. Again, you have your base year, your base period, and this is a system defined fund statement. So I've got a quarter to date column, a year to date. You're probably thinking, wow, this is pretty ugly, not something that you would want any donor to actually see. Or so what I have done is I have actually created this, and this is a preview of what this looks like. I created this in our fund statement designer. So the fund statement designer is an additional piece to your custom design statements. As you can see, I've got a logo up here. I have formatting in here. So it looks nice and could be printed right out of the system. And then I also have a separate page for gift and grant detail. You can also put administrative expenses detail out here as well. So that is fund statements that we've taken this very utilitarian look and turned into something nicer looking for the front end. We also have fund statement export. So this is used if you are going to be exporting your data files for your fund statements and merging them into a Word document. So let me just show you what that looks like here. And this one also has base year, base period, has all the selection criteria that you have available to you as far as when the dates for the detail that's going to show up. And I am exporting this. So let me run, and my FIMS is installed on my laptop, so it's considered to be on premise. So I'm going to use an auto launch feature because Word is also installed on my workstation. So I'm going to run this report. And I'm going to create a Word document and auto launch only. So here's my message from Word. And here is my auto launch. So that actually opened Microsoft Word for me. This particular fund statement that I have just exported also includes a separate page for a letter before the actual fund statement information. So if you decide to use Word, you'll have all of the formatting options that Word has available, along with gift and grant detail. So this is another way to export information for a fund statement. All right, and then the last one I'm just going to show you right now, just to give you kind of a peek at what is possible before we get into the details of how you actually do some of this stuff, is going to be what we call a columnar financial statement. And a columnar financial statement, let me run this. I need to find my, here we go. All right, so you still have the ability to pick the base year, the base period. You have options, filtering options, just like you do with any of the other reports. And the difference in this, if you look, is instead of having the GL accounts going down the left-hand side of the screen, they go across the top. They're columns instead of rows. And in this case, each one of the rows is a separate fund. So this one is a columnar fund statement. I've got the columns here are the same as what would show up on a fund statement. This is actually a great report if you are want to review and spot check your fund statements before you actually send them out. Instead of having to look at each one of the individual statements, you've got everything one row, like a row for every separate fund. So it's much easier to look at this information this way than individual statements. Okay, so the row and column formats together are actually what define these financial statements. So if you look at my design statements browser, one of those reports that I ran is Budge 1. That was the year-to-date budget to actual. So if you look in this row format column, you're going to see that there is a row format called budget-ACT, and then there's also a separate column, budget to actual. So by combining these two, the row and the column, that actually creates a statement that I can actually run and see how that works. So let's start with the row format, because you have to create these pieces separately. So the first step is to create a row format. The second step is to create a column format. And then the third step is to create a statement record that includes both the row and the column formats. So there's three different ways to create row formats. And let me just open one here. I'm going to go to my little row format tab. Now, right here, there's a button called Create Copy Format. So what you can do is if you click on Create Copy Format, you have two options here. You can create a brand new row format with no rows in it, and you can start from scratch, or you can copy an existing row format. The trick here is that you actually have to have the row format in this little drop down. So right here, on my drop down, I'm showing the budget to actual row format. Whatever you want to copy has to be visible here because that's what it's going to copy. But this is how you can create a new row format from scratch. If I was to do this, let's see, today, whoops. So this, when I do that, gives me a totally blank row format, and I can start from scratch. Or if I was to, now let me just demonstrate something else here. There's a little remove format button to the right of create and copy. So if I click on remove format, it's going to give me a message that says I'm about to remove the entire row format 91124. Now this is exactly what I want to do here because there's nothing in there So if I say yes, it removes it. I can tell you there is no undo button. If you pull up a row format and delete the wrong one in error, there's no way to undo that. You would literally have to sit down and recreate it. So be careful with the remove format. If I was to, let me go back to my year-to-date budget to actual. Now, just a little tip here. If your cursor has highlighted one of these and you go to the row format tab, you're going to see that you're actually in the row format for that statement that you happen to be sitting on. So I'm going to go back to my year-to-date budget to actual, go to row format, and when I click on create copy, I'm going to give this a name, but I'm going to say copy row format. And if you notice in parentheses, it says the row format that I'm copying. So I'm going to say okay. And literally I have a duplicate of that budget to actual row format. This is a great tool because if you don't need to make that many changes, this saves you a lot of work. So that's very helpful. So I'm going to remove this because I don't need it. And I have more than enough out there. And let me go back to my budget. Okay, there is one other way that you can create row formats, and I think this is awesome because it creates all of them for you. Under processes here, there is an option called auto create row formatter. So let's say that starting from scratch isn't appealing, or copy an existing one is also not very helpful. You can go to this auto create row formatter, click on run process. I can give this a name. And then under statement type, I can create a balance sheet for all GL accounts. I can create a profit and loss for all GL accounts based on a fund class level. And what this is going to do is this is actually going to look at your master chart and pull in all of the GL accounts that pertain to the balance sheet, profit and loss, or at a fund class level. So I'm going to do a balance sheet for all my GL accounts, and I'm going to say, okay. I didn't even actually get to blink, and this thing says that it has been auto-created. If I go back to my row format tab and I click the drop down, 9/11/24. This is the row format that I just created. So it brought in all of my GL accounts that pertain to a balance sheet. It put description rows, it put total rows, it auto built this for me. So now all I need to do is go in and make some adjustments. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is that it's pulling GL accounts. So um, it's always good to make sure your master chart is current and that all of your GL accounts are actually there. Now, once you have this created, so what we're looking at, this very first column is the row number. So the row number is used to determine what sequence this is in. These rows are actually in. So if I wanted to change the location of this checking account with the one above it, I can go in and actually change the numbers and swap them. So I've changed that, and I'm changing this one to 60, and I'm going to save it. Now, this didn't refresh automatically, so I'm going to show you this little button on the far right-hand side. When I click on refresh, this is going to reorder them. So now this generic checking account is ahead of the Lisa Jones sweep savings. Another thing with the row numbers is when you're creating these, if you're starting from scratch, I always recommend keeping at least 10 numbers in between the rows. And the reason being is that at some point in the future, if you've added additional accounts to your master chart, you're going to want to be able to insert them into the proper place in your financial statements. And by having those at least 10 numbers. And as you can see, FIMS actually used 20 when I auto-created this balance sheet row format. It gives you that flexibility to put those row numbers, put those accounts in there. And then this field up here is actually what's displaying for us is the row format name. So it happens to be 91124. The next column is your description, which you can let be pulled in automatically, or you can change whatever happens to be in here for a description. It's totally user definable. You've got your format column, which basically determines what kind of format that particular row is. There's description rows, there's pulling information from general ledger, which is what these GL rows are. There's double underlines, there's total rows, there's a single underlined, there's beginning fund balances, there's ending fund balances. So there's all kinds of different formats that are available to you for each one of those individual rows. On your print column, this is actually determining where this is going to print. So if it's blank, like most of these are, it's not going to skip a line before printing the next row. But in this case, it says skip one line. So that means between total liabilities and fund balances, I'm going to get a blank line. And the other option here is do not print the row. So it would be literally be a non-printing row. You might need something in your row format that allows you to run a formula and you don't want it to print on the financial statement, but you need it for that total row that is visible. So that'd be. And then you've got print columns, so you can determine which column these are going to print in. And if we look, you can actually see column A, B, C. So this determines which column that the value is going to print. You also have this next column for normal balance. So basically what this does, there's only two options, debit and credit. When it's set to a DR, it prints the balance as it appears in the general ledger. So if it's an asset, it's a positive number. If it's a liability, it's a negative amount. By using DR, it'll show up exactly as it should. But if you want to show the sign as reversed, you would use CR. And then under the formula column, for example, here's my formula for total liabilities. If I click in this formula column, you'll see there's a little FX on the right-hand side. If I click on that, I can actually see what the formula is for that particular row. And in this case, it's row 500 to 740. I want the total of all those rows. You also have the ability to choose which column you want these to print in. The operators down below are plus, dash, and 2. And that is your formula that's available to you under the formula column. The last two columns are from and through. For example, if you look at row 820, that is showing me fund balance for ending fund balance for my historic gift balance, which happens to be fund balance 1. So in my from column, I just want to see fund balance 1. 840 is my earnings balance, which is my number 2. And then 860 is my third balance, which is number 3. So it's telling the system which fund balance, ending fund balance is I want to see printed on my statement. Okay. All right, just a couple tips for row numbering. So I've already mentioned numbering in increments of 10 or 20 to give you future expansion room later. I've showed you how to just change the numbers and click on refresh to reorder them. You also have the ability of using the same row number more than once. So let's say, for example, I have a couple non-contiguous account numbers that I want added together. I could use the same row number twice, like I could use row 60 more than once, I could change this to 60 as well. What's going to happen is FIMS is going to automatically add those two together and give me a total and show up on the statement, financial statement. I don't actually need to create a total row. So that's one other option that you have with the row numbers. All right. So now we're going to take a peek at creating column formats. That's the second piece that we need to put into place before we can create our statement and run a financial report. So under the column format, there's 16 columns. And when you're setting these up, you're going to work from left to right. Now, you're always going to be able to see all 16 columns, but unless there is a value in this type row, that means the column isn't being used. Sorry about that. This is the budget to actual column that I used earlier. As you can see, I have a value in column A, B, C, and D for my variances. The rest of these columns don't have anything in the type field, so they're not being used. Unfortunately, there's no way to, if you have done something in the past and you want to just remove one column, there's no way to just remove the column. You have to kind of shift everything over to the left. We also have the same options here for creating column formats. We can copy one or we can start from scratch. And then you also have the remove format, which again, there's no undo button for. Now in the column, in each one of these columns, there's a spot for a heading. And then there's a spot for the type. What type of column is this? Is it a percent? Is it a GL? Or is it a calculated? And if you notice, I have one of each in this particular column format. So the first one is my budget numbers pulling from general ledger. The second column is my actual numbers pulling from general ledger. And then the third column is giving me my variance. So if you look in my formula here, I have B minus A. That's the formula that needs to be in this particular column. And then in column D, I have a percent variance. So in my formula, I have C divided by A. The fiscal year. So the fiscal year and the period fields, they all say base. Essentially what that is, when you go to run your consolidated financial reports, if you notice, here's my base year and my base period. So if your column format has base and base, it's actually going to look at what you choose at runtime. So it gives you the most flexibility when you run these things. There's additional features that you can actually put in here. So in my fiscal year field, if I had base -1, what that would give me is a column that had data from whatever base year I picked. So if I chose 2004, it's going to show me 2003 numbers in my particular report. You could do -2, -3, whatever you might need in the base. Now in the period field, you can have base, which will give you the 1 month and it'll be that current month. So if I was running it for 2024 period 9, that would give me September. But there's other things that you can do here. For example, maybe this is a quarter column. So I could do, if I was to do this, when I run my report, what this is going to do for me is, yes, base year and period. So it would take if I was doing this in March, what it would do is base. It would take my base period March -2, which would take 2 months away to base, which would essentially give me period 1 to 3 in my column. So there's things that you can do in the actual columns that allow you to not have to specify every time you run the report. Now you could come in here and say, instead of base, you could say 1 to 3. And that every time I run this report, that's exactly what I would get, period 1 to 3 or 4 to 6. But by doing the base minus 2 to base, it gives me the flexibility to not have to do that. So I can choose it at runtime. You have two options here, actual or budget numbers. And then right below that, you have options for current or year to date. So anytime you're doing a calculation, whether it's a percent or a calculation, the numbers, the current or year to date is going to be current. If you notice right below here, you also have the ability to filter a column based on any of your fund codes, your division, your class, your type, your subtype. If you're using the functional expense feature, you could also have a column based on each functional expense, maybe by department. You can also filter this by fund. And you also have the option to hide the column. So maybe you've got, you need two columns in order to reach a specific calculation. You can hide the two columns you don't need and only make the one that has the final numbers as visible. All right. So, all right, so let me go back. So now we have, and actually, I'm going to copy this one. So I have a column format. And okay, so now we have a row format 91124. We have copied a column format, which actually does not make sense for the row that I made, but for demonstration purposes, it'll work. Now, the last part of this is to actually go in and create the statement record so that we can run this as an actual report. So I'm going to go back to my little statement tab. And to create a new statement, we're going to use the white piece of paper to create a new statement. And this is what we see. So here is the actual code. So when you're creating your statement record, the code that you put in here is what you're going to use when you actually run your statement. And then you've got a description field. So this could be whatever you would like it to be. And then you've got your base year and your base period. So this is basically a place to start. And then what's going to override this is when you actually run these reports and choose your base year and your base period. The next two pieces that we need to do here is we need to pull in the row format that we're going to use for this statement. And we also have to pull in the column format. So now what I've done is created a statement record for this 91124 row and column that we've added to the system. Now down below, you're going to see on the left-hand side, you've got available statement types. And then on the right-hand side, you've got use with these statement types. So the way that you would actually define a columnar financial statement is different than how you would define it for a regular, say, balance sheet or profit and loss. So you would never have on the right-hand side, you wouldn't have columnar financial statements and consolidated financial statements because they're run differently. So that's why this columnar is on the left-hand side, but you can add or remove anything. So let's say this doesn't have anything to do with fund statements. I'm going to remove them. The only way I'm going to run this is consolidated financial statements. What this does essentially, it just makes it easier when you go to run something like columnar financial statements. It sets it so that it's not available in the dropdown. So you wouldn't have somebody trying to run a regular financial statement in the columnar financial statement report because that statement code is not available for it. And then you've also got your fund statement export and your columnar. Let me just show you what my columnar looks like. So this one is set up as a columnar, and if you notice on the right-hand side, it says use with these statement types. It's only available for me when I run a columnar financial statement. So again, it just makes it easier when you're running your reports for things to not show up where they're actually not going to work. All right, so there's our statement record, and what I'm gonna do is, I'm pretty sure this isn't gonna work right because of what I used for a column, but let's see. Okay, so this is using the row and column that I linked together. Here's all of my account numbers down the left-hand side. Here's my columns with my budget, actual variance numbers, columns across the top. You also have the ability to rerun, which is very handy if you are trying to get some specific information. All right. Think I had one more thing I wanted to tell you all. I guess not. Okay. So yeah, so kind of a little summary here is that to run any of your custom financial statements, you'll come to these little options in between the gray lines. You need a row format, you need a column format, and you need to have created a statement code. So depending on what you happen to be sitting on in here, when you go to your row format, you're going to see that row in that column for that specific statement. All right. What I'm going to do is run a couple other options so you can see what else is possible for financial statements. And let's see. So I'm going to go to reports and I'm going to run consolidated financial statement. All right, so one of the ones that I have is agency balance sheet. So essentially, let me just run this for you to show you what else is possible. So if you look at this balance sheet, the reason why this is my FASB 136 balance sheet is because I have a row in my liability section that have the total fund balance for all my agency funds. So what I have done very easily to segregate all of these funds, and let me just go to my fund module and show you what I have done is that in my fund coding, I actually have a division code A for agency. So any of my funds that are coded as agency funds are showing up under this agency designated funds. And this just makes my balance sheet easier to define where my liabilities are all sitting here. And you don't have a fund who has all of its assets sitting in a liability account, so their fund statements look kind of funky. So this is one option, just something so you can see what is possible. Another one is I have a profit and loss with different columns. Let me see, for different subtypes. Here it is. And let me run this. So what you've got here is your P&L accounts down the left-hand side and separate columns for each one of your subtypes. So this is essentially providing a P&L for each of your subtypes. You could do the same thing with your divisions or your classes because all of those codes are available in the column format section. So that's also, and then you've got a total over here. So if you need to split those out, that's a good way to do that because you can take care of that in the columns. And then let me show you one more. Let's see. Budget to actual. Let me close that. I think I grabbed the wrong one. Sorry about that. Okay, I guess I miswrote the name of that. All right, so those are some options for consolidated financial statements. The fund statement export that I ran earlier. Let me just load this. So in addition, you can, in this case, I have my auto launch with my Word document specified. My template is here. I can see where all of the information is being exported so that it's available for my reporting. Because this is a fund statement export, you have all of your standard options for gift and grant detail, your master subordinate funds, depending on how you want them to work. In this case, mine are exporting masters and sub funds, but you can consolidate them. You can ignore master links. And if you notice, when I hover over these options, there's a little cheat note that shows up so you know exactly what is happening. You can also filter your standard filter with your fund statements. You can also filter by fund reps. So you could do one fund statement per fund, or you could generate fund statements for every fund association, every profile that receives a statement. And the fund statement, just so you all know, the fund statement designer is, whoops. Sorry, I have that Zoom meeting thing at the top of my screen. The fund statement designer is available. If you were to highlight the fund statement, the statement code that you want here, when you go to file maintenance, here's your fund statement designer. So that's how you actually open the fund statement designer. And the fund statement designer uses the row and column format, just like your standard fund statement export or your financial statements. So if fund statement designer is something you're looking to use, if you've got row and column formats already defined, that's a great place to start. Now, the only other thing that I want to let everybody know is that in a columnar statement, it works a little bit different. And let me find one. Let's see. So for a columnar financial statement, for every row, you have to have a corresponding column. Let me just find. Hold on. Oh, CFS. Okay, so this one is called CFS. So if we look at my row format, so these are all of the rows. And if you notice my contributions, I have row 20 in here twice because my numbers are not contiguous and I want them to be added up. So for every row, you have to have a corresponding column. So I have to have a column for net assets. I have to have a column for contributions. When you do that, when you set up your column format that way and link them into a statement code, you're going to get that columnar financial statement. Now, one other thing, sorry, I have one more thing to tell people. Row format report. In case somebody has accidentally or is going to accidentally delete a row formatter, there is a row format report that you can run. And what this will do is this will give you all of the details in that row format report. So I strongly recommend people just save a copy of this someplace. So if somebody does accidentally delete a row format, then you can just sit down with this and quickly put everything back in because you have all the details right here. Now with the row format report, you have to choose each one separately, run it separately, but in the column format report, which is right below it, it's going to print one report with all of your column formats in it. So this one, you just need to save one report, but I do strongly recommend people save a copy, even if you print it, if you save it somewhere, just so that you know that you can put your hands on it easily if something happens and a format is deleted, whether it's a row or a column. And I think that is the last of what I have for today's session. And like I say, there is a handout. There's a lot of details in the handout. And if anybody has any questions after the fact or wants, to try to do something, just put in a support case. We're more than happy to help.
Perfect. Thanks, Robin. Let me take over sharing screen. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A and chat now. We'll stay on for a little bit longer to get anything and everything you have answered. If not, you can put in any support ticket or reach out to Hello at Impact or FIMS at Impact. The next Let's Talk Solutions will be on November 13th. We hope to see you then. You'll be getting an email from us beforehand with all the registration information as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again.